41 years of marriage, 3 grandchildren who called me Pop Pop, and all it took to end it was a bag of ice. My name is Walter Kessler. I lived on Birchwood Lane in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, the kind of street where the same 6 families had raised their kids together for 3 decades, and nobody ever moved unless somebody died. I drove a 2016 Ford F-150. Paid off, dependable, smelled like sawdust, because I'd spent 38 years running a small cabinet-making shop 2 miles from the house. Kessler, Custom, Woodwork. Not a big operation, 6 employees at our peak, but steady, honest work. The kind that let a man look at a finished kitchen and know his hands built it. My wife, Denise, drove a leased white Cadillac Escalade with a bow on it that I'd bought her for our 40th anniversary. The same year she started introducing herself at parties as recently retired from Kessler Woodwork, even though the only thing she'd ever done at that shop was drop off my lunch twice a week and complain about the proper sawdust on my boots. We built that business together, or at least, that's the story she told at dinner parties. The truth was quieter. I was 24 when I opened the shop with a small business loan, and every dollar I'd saved working construction since I was 17. Denise was 22, waitressing at a diner off Route 8, drowning in debt from a bad first marriage that had left her holding a car loan for a vehicle her ex-husband had driven off with anyway. She used to sit at my kitchen table doing math on a napkin, trying to figure out which bill she could skip that month without the lights getting shut off. I watched her do that for 6 months before I asked her to marry me. I knew exactly what I was walking into. I chose it anyway. When we married, I paid off her debt in full, $11,000, which in 1985 was a small fortune for a man just starting a business. I didn't make a speech about it. I wrote the check, mailed it to the finance company myself, and told her it was done before she even knew I'd started. She cried at our kitchen table in the apartment we rented above a hardware store on Detroit Avenue. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," I told her. That was the last time, in 41 years, that Denise Kessler cried tears of gratitude instead of tears of performance. The shop grew slow and steady, the way real things do. By our 10th anniversary, we'd bought the house on Birchwood Lane, mortgage in my name only, because my credit was clean, and hers still carried scars from the first marriage that took years to fully clear. She signed the deed at our kitchen table, same as before, tears running down her face. "You're taking care of us again," she said. "We're taking care of us," I told her. She signed the paper. We moved in that spring. Our son Gary came along 2 years later. Our daughter Patricia, 3 years after that. I ran the shop 6 days a week for most of their childhoods. Came home smelling like walnut stain and sawdust. Coached Gary's Little League team for 6 seasons. Sat in a folding chair through every one of Patricia's dance recitals, even though I understood maybe 10% of what was happening on that stage. Denise worked part-time at a bridal shop downtown for a while, then stopped working altogether once the shop started turning real profit in the early 90s. I didn't mind. I told myself, a man works so his wife doesn't have to. I believed that for a long time. I believed a lot of things for a long time. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, I'm going to tell you what happened to me 2 months ago, on a Tuesday that started like every other Tuesday I'd had for 41 years, and ended with my daughter driving me to a hotel with everything I owned in the bed of my own truck. Stick around. This one's got a turn in it you won't see coming. If you've got a minute, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one of them. Here's the thing nobody tells you about a marriage that's slowly going hollow. It doesn't announce itself. There's no single morning where you wake up and know something's wrong. It's more like a house settling a creak here, a crack in the drywall there, and you tell yourself it's just the foundation shifting the way old houses do, until one day you realize the whole structure's been leaning for years, and you just got used to walking on a slant. The shop did well, better than well, some years. By the time I turned 55, Kessler Custom Woodwork had a 2-year waiting list and a reputation that stretched from Cleveland to Columbus. I sold the business to my longtime foreman, Ray Dombrowski, when I turned 62. Structured it so I'd draw a modest monthly payout for the next decade while Ray ran the day-to-day. Combined with my Social Security and the retirement account I'd built quietly over 4 decades, it was enough. Not flashy, but enough. A man doesn't need flashy when he built something real with his own two hands. Denise had a different relationship with money than I did, and it only got worse once the shop started paying out steady. It started small, a redone kitchen we didn't need since the one I'd built with my own hands 18 years earlier was still perfect. Then, it was a country club membership, $400 a month for a golf course. Neither of us used more than twice a year. Then it was trips Naples with her sister every February, a cruise through the Mediterranean for our anniversary that cost more than my first truck. She'd come home from these trips glowing, posting photos with captions like living my best life, and I'd be the one quietly moving money between accounts to make sure the property taxes cleared before the golf club's autopay came out of the same account. The separate accounts came up about 4 years ago. I just think a woman my age should have something that's hers, she told me one evening, loading the dishwasher like she was discussing the weather. It's not about you, Walter. It's about independence. I said sure, whatever made her comfortable, because that's what I'd always done. Kept the peace, kept the house running, told myself she was just going through something. What I didn't understand yet was what that separation would reveal once the math got laid bare on paper. My retirement draw and Social Security were fixed, predictable, and every dollar was already spoken for property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the health insurance supplement that covered us both, since neither of us qualified for Medicare yet. Her half went to golf memberships and cruises, and a grandson's private school tuition she'd started quietly covering without ever mentioning it to me, because apparently that was independence too, as long as it was her money going out, and never mine coming in. It was a Sunday dinner, about a year and a half ago, that first cracked something open in my chest. Denise's sister Carol was visiting from Naples, staying with us for a long weekend, and we'd ordered a whole spread from the Italian place on Lorraine Avenue that Denise loved. I was clearing the serving dishes off the table when Denise said it, right in front of Carol, not even lowering her voice. Must be nice to be retired and have nothing to do all day while I'm still figuring out how to keep us afloat. Carol laughed into her wine glass. I stood there holding a casserole dish, the garlic bread crumbs still warm through the oven mitt, and I said nothing. I thought about the $11,000 I'd wired to a finance company in 1985. I thought about the deed with only my name on it. I thought about 38 years of sawdust in my lungs so this family would never miss a meal, and I put the casserole dish in the sink and dried my hands. But it was the grandkids that really got under my skin, if I'm honest with you. Gary's boy, Tyler, is 14 now, plays travel hockey the way only an Ohio kid can obsessed, all elbows and ambition on the ice. Patricia's daughter, Emma, is 11, quiet and watchful, the kind of kid who notices everything and says nothing until she's ready. I'd been the one driving Tyler to 6 a.m., practices for 3 winters running, because Gary works nights at the hospital and his wife works mornings. I'd been the one sitting through every one of Emma's piano recitals in a folding chair, with my knees aching, clapping too loud, the way grandfathers are supposed to. And somewhere along the way, I started noticing the way both kids had begun looking at me the way their grandmother did, like I was a nice old man who was around, but not particularly necessary. Last October, Tyler came to me about an elite travel hockey program, the kind that runs tournaments across 3 states, and costs a small fortune in registration and gear. The fee was $3,800. I looked at my calendar. The property tax installment was due in 9 days, and I'd need to move funds carefully to cover both without dipping into the account I kept for medical emergencies. Bud, I told him, let me sit down with your dad this weekend and figure out the timing. I want to make this happen for you. I just need a few days. He nodded, but I could see the disappointment settle into his shoulders, the specific slump of a kid who's already learned where to expect no. Denise walked into the kitchen right as he was leaving. She dug through her purse, pulled out her card, and set it on the counter. Here, sweetheart. Nana's got you covered. She looked right past me at her grandson. It's a shame not everyone in this family understands what matters. Tyler's whole face lit up. He hugged her and left. I stood in my own kitchen, in the house I'd built with money I'd earned with my own 2 hands, and I told myself it wasn't a pattern. I told myself that enough times that I almost believed it. I was still driving Tyler to 6 a.m., practices, Still the one who remembered Emma's recital dates before her own mother did. Still the man who showed up to everything, including the tournament 3 weeks later up in Erie, where I sat in a freezing rink for 4 hours with bad coffee and watched my grandson score the game-winning goal in overtime. I stood up so fast I spilled the coffee down my coat and didn't even notice until I got back to the truck. On the ride home, Tyler had his phone out, texting. "Nana's gonna post the highlights," he said. "She wasn't there," I said. "Quiet. Coach filmed it. She always posts when he films it." He went back to his phone. I watched the road, the flat gray Ohio highway sliding past, and I didn't say another word, because what was there to say? Your grandmother's about to take credit for a goal she's going to watch for the first time on a 14-inch phone screen tonight, while I'm the one who smelled like rink ice and gas station coffee for 4 hours straight. I just kept driving. They say the thing that finally breaks a man is never really about the thing itself. It's about every single thing that came before it, stacked so high that the last piece doesn't even have to be heavy to bring the whole pile down. It was an ordinary Tuesday in late June. Nothing special about the date. No argument the night before. No anniversary. Nothing simmering. Just a gray, humid, forgettable Tuesday, the kind that ends before you even remember it started. I'd spent the morning at a doctor's appointment for my knee, the one I'd worn down over 4 decades of standing on concrete shop floors, and the afternoon running errands, the pharmacy, the hardware store, out of pure habit, even though I hadn't run the shop in 8 years, and finally the grocery store, because we were out of nearly everything, and Denise had a golf outing that ran long. I came home, unloaded the bags, and started putting together dinner. Nothing fancy. I was going to grill a couple of chicken breasts and throw together a salad, the kind of simple meal I'd made 1,000 times over 4 decades of marriage. I had the cutting board out, the chicken on the counter, when I realized I'd forgotten ice for the cooler, since we were supposed to have Gary's family over that weekend for the 4th. I opened the freezer, and there wasn't a single bag in there. She'd used the last of it for a cocktail party with her golf friends 2 days earlier and never replaced it. Denise walked in from the garage right about then, golf visor still on, sweating a little, dropping her bag of clubs by the back door with a clatter. I mentioned, casual as anything, that we were out of ice and I'd need to run back out before the weekend. She looked at me for a second, the way you look at something mildly annoying, like a fly you keep having to wave off. Then she said it. Flat. No heat in her voice at all, which somehow made it land harder than if she'd screamed it. "You know, Walter, for a man who doesn't do anything all day, you sure can't seem to keep basic things stocked around here. I'm the one still working. The least you could do is manage a bag of ice." The kitchen went dead silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator door I'd left open. I stood there in my own kitchen, in the house I'd paid off with 38 years of sawdust in my lungs, and I thought about the $11,000 check I'd written before we were even married. I thought about the deed, with only my name on it. I thought about the golf memberships and the Mediterranean cruise and Tyler's hockey fee that she'd swooped in on with her card held high like a trophy. I thought about all of it in about 4 seconds flat. Then I said, the only thing I trusted myself to say out loud, "Understood." I closed the freezer door, walked out to the garage, and sat in the truck in the dark for a long time. I didn't slam anything. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, while something old and quiet inside my chest finished coming apart. The way a beam finally gives after years of slow rot nobody bothered to check on. When I finally came back inside, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. And let me tell you, son or daughter, or whoever's listening tonight, there's a world of difference between those two things. Angry men make noise. Done men make plans. The next morning, I was sitting across from an attorney named Linda Marsh in a small office off Detroit Avenue before 9 a.m. She'd practiced family law in Cuyahoga County for almost 30 years, and she had the particular calm of someone who'd heard every version of every story 100 times over and still looked at you like yours mattered. I brought a folder with me, bank statements, going back decades, the original canceled check from 1,985, paying off Denise's debt, the deed to the house, solely in my name, retirement account statements, The sale agreement for the shop showing the structured payout was entirely mine. 41 years of paper telling a very different story than the one Denise had been performing on Facebook for her golf friends. Linda put on her glasses and read through everything without saying a word for a long stretch. Then she looked up. "Mr. Kessler," she said, "do you have any idea what you're sitting on here?" "Starting to," I told her. She walked me through it piece by piece, calm and precise. The house, solely in my name, funded by premarital and early marriage assets, could be sold off-market to a cash buyer in a fast, clean closing, with the proceeds locked into an escrow account and applied first against the marital debt I'd cleared before we ever married, $11,000 in 1985, which with documented interest and inflation adjustments, Linda said, isn't nothing. And it isn't nothing that it's fully documented in your handwriting on a canceled check. Then she asked about the grandkids, since custody wasn't relevant to two grown children, but she wanted the full emotional record for the settlement negotiations. Who showed up, who drove, who sat in the cold rinks and folding chairs. I told her everything. She made notes and nodded slowly. Then, she pulled out a calculator, ran Denise's part-time bridal shop consulting income against my structured retirement payout and Social Security, factored in the length of the marriage, and turned the screen toward me. I looked at the number. I kept my face still. Inside, something settled, like a long equation finally balancing after 41 years of not adding up. That's a conservative monthly spousal support figure a judge could reasonably order given the asset picture, she said, starting from the date of the decree. Per month? I asked. Per month, she said. I nodded slow. Closed the folder. What do you need from me? Time, she said. And the ability to keep everything at home looking completely normal for a few weeks while we file the paperwork and lock in the sale authorization. Can you do that? I've been doing that for about 4 decades, I told her. She almost smiled. Then let's get started. If this story's got you hooked already, drop a comment and let me know. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and settle in, because we're just getting started. Here's what nobody warns you about executing a plan like this one. The legal side is the easy part. Lawyers handle lawyers. The hard part is walking back into your own house every single night and acting like nothing in the world has changed. And I did it. For 6 weeks, I did it without a single crack showing. I drove Tyler to his summer hockey conditioning 3 mornings a week. I mowed the lawn on Saturdays, same as always. I paid the property tax installment on time. I kept the health insurance active. Kept the golf club dues paid, so nothing looked different from the outside. Kept showing up to every family dinner with the same tired smile I'd worn for years. Emma had a piano recital at her elementary school the second week of that stretch. I took the afternoon off from nothing in particular, since retirement means every afternoon is technically off. But I mean I made a point of getting there early, found a seat in the second row. She spotted me from the little riser they'd set up in the gymnasium and gave me the look, the one that says, "Pop, pop, please don't be so obvious." So I moved back 2 rows without being asked. She played her piece beautifully, some simple arrangement of a song I didn't recognize, and I clapped louder than anyone in that gymnasium. Afterward, she found me by the folding chairs stacked against the wall. "You didn't have to come, Pop Pop," she said. "I know," I told her. "You were wonderful." "Thanks," she said, and went back to find her friends. I drove home in the early evening light and told myself she'd understand one day. I told myself that enough times it almost worked. The way it always almost worked. Tyler's summer showcase tournament was the last weekend of that 6-week stretch, down in Columbus, 3 hours south. I drove down alone in the truck, since Denise had a golf trip to Naples planned that same weekend that she wasn't about to cancel for a summer hockey showcase. I sat in the stands for 6 hours across 2 days. Watched my grandson play some of the best hockey I'd ever seen him play, including a breakaway goal in the semifinal that had the whole rink on its feet. I stood up so fast I nearly dropped my coffee again. On the drive home, Tyler had his phone out. "Nana's gonna want to see the video," he said. "She wasn't there," I said. Quiet, watching the highway. "Coach filmed the whole thing. She always reposts it." I didn't say anything else. I just kept my eyes on the road and my hand steady on the wheel, because there wasn't anything left to say that hadn't already been said inside my own head 100 times over the last 6 weeks. Meanwhile, things were moving exactly on schedule on the legal side. By the 5th week, Linda had secured the sale authorization on the house. A cash buyer locked in through an investment group that specialized in fast, off-market closings. Escrow established. All the paperwork signed, and waiting in a folder in her office, off Detroit Avenue. I found a small 2-bedroom condo about 15 minutes away, close enough that nothing about my routine with the grandkids would need to change, with a little balcony that got good afternoon light, and a quiet building full of retirees who kept to themselves. I put down the deposit on a Thursday. That evening, while Denise was on a video call with her sister Carol about their upcoming trip, I packed the first bag quietly in the garage documents, the few personal items that mattered, things that had only ever had my name on them. I staged everything behind the winter coats in the hall closet. Standing in that closet with a duffel bag holding what amounted to the entire second half of my life, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not grief, not rage, something closer to relief, the specific, bone-deep relief of a man who'd finally stopped waiting for somebody to notice him. Now, Denise's 70th birthday was coming up on the 4th Saturday of August, and she'd been planning it for months. 20-some family members and friends, a full backyard party catered by the place she loved on Lorraine Avenue, string lights strung across the deck I'd built with my own hands 15 years earlier. Her sister Carol was flying in from Naples, Gary and his family, Patricia and her family, cousins, old neighbors, the whole assembly gathering to celebrate 70 years of a life she'd built, at least in the version of the story she told everyone else. She mentioned the party to me twice in passing that week, both times scrolling through her phone while she talked. I listened. I nodded. I told her it sounded like it was going to be a wonderful day. She had no idea I meant it for reasons that had nothing to do with cake. I had one more thing to prepare. I found a wooden box at the shop Ray still let me use the workshop out back whenever I wanted, and he helped me sand and stain it myself. Cherry wood, the same finish I used to use on kitchen cabinets decades ago. I lined the inside with felt. I wrapped it in simple brown paper and tied it with plain twine, the kind of packaging that doesn't scream anything at all until you open it. Inside was a legal folder nearly 2 inches thick. I finished it on a Sunday afternoon, while Denise was at the club with her golf friends, sitting alone at the same kitchen table where she'd signed the deed to this house 40 years earlier, crying tears that used to mean something. I set the box on the closet shelf above my packed bags and looked at it for a long moment. Happy birthday, Denise. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. I didn't do what I did because I was angry. I was well past angry by that point. I did it because a woman stood in my kitchen and told me I couldn't even manage a bag of ice after 41 years of managing every single thing that kept that house standing. So I decided to take her completely at her word. What happened next, you're not going to want to miss. I scheduled it for a Saturday afternoon in late August. The day of the party arrived the way all the truly significant days in a life tend to completely ordinary on the surface. Warm, humid, one of those late summer Ohio afternoons where the cicadas won't quit. I was up at 6, made coffee, stood at the kitchen window in my robe looking out at the backyard I'd landscaped myself, the maple tree we'd planted the year Patricia was born, now taller than the house. I built a good life inside that house. I just hadn't been the one living it. Not really. Not for a long while. By 10, Denise was in full production mode. The caterers arrived in white polos and started setting up chafing dishes on the deck with quiet efficiency. Tables got carried out. A banner went up across the back porch that read, "Celebrating 70" in gold script, which told you everything about the tone of the day before a single guest arrived. I helped carry chairs, moved the grill into position, smiled at the catering crew. A normal husband at a normal party. Nobody standing in that backyard had any idea it was the last Saturday that house would ever belong to me. Guests started arriving around noon. Carol came first, swept in from the airport, still wheeling her suitcase, hugged her sister on the driveway, and immediately launched into a tour of the backyard she'd seen a dozen times before, narrating it to a family friend like she was hosting the thing herself. Walter redid this deck years ago, but Denise picked every single detail, the lights, the furniture, all of it. I was standing maybe 10 feet away when she said that. I let it go. 41 years gives a man a lot of practice letting things go. Gary arrived with his wife and Tyler. Patricia came with her husband and Emma. By 2 o'clock, the backyard was full. 30 people easy. The volume climbing the way it does at these things. The smell of barbecue and citronella candles thick in the air. Somebody had ordered a cake from the bakery downtown that did custom photo printing. Denise's face on top of it in edible ink, mid-laugh, mid-golf swing. A cake with your own face on it mid-swing. I don't know what a man's supposed to say about that. I don't think there's anything to say. Denise moved through the party the way she always did when the audience was right. Laughing loud, touching people's arms, luminous in a bright yellow sundress. Carol trailed a few steps behind her, dropping little superlatives into every conversation her sister had. Did you hear? She's thinking about running for the club's board. That Escalade Walter surprised her with it. Isn't that sweet? I watched from the edge of the patio. Quiet, patient. A man with absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone standing in that yard. Tyler and Emma orbited their grandmother's side of the party most of the afternoon, the way they had for a while now, which in the mathematics of my recent life was actually about what I'd come to expect. The wooden box sat on the gift table near the back door. Plain brown paper among the bright bags and bows. Nothing about it drawing attention yet. Good things come to those who wait. They sang happy birthday around 4. The caterers dimmed nothing since it was outdoors, but somebody had strung the lights on early anyway, and they flickered on just as the cake came out. Candles lit, 30 voices rising into the humid air. Carol stood beside her sister, with her hand pressed to her chest like she was witnessing a coronation. I stood toward the back of the crowd and sang along, quiet. Denise closed her eyes while everyone sang, leaned into it the way she always did, the tilted chin, the practiced humility of someone who'd built her whole identity around being watched. I thought, enjoy this part, Denise. This is the last few seconds of the life you think you're standing in. The song ended. Applause. Somebody called out speech, and she laughed and waved it off with exactly the kind of reluctance that means someone very much wants to give a speech. I stepped forward instead, the wooden box in both hands. The yard noticed before she did. 30 people watching the quiet husband who'd been invisible all afternoon suddenly walked toward the center of the party carrying something. Denise turned and saw the box. She glanced at Carol first, and there was a smirk there. Small, almost involuntary, the kind that comes straight from decades of conditioned expectation rather than any conscious thought. Let's see what Walter managed to put together, she said, loud enough for the nearby guests to chuckle. She took the box from me, set it on the table, untied the twine, lifted the lid. The party kept making its small noise for a few seconds, glasses clinking, someone laughing near the grill. Denise looked into the box, and her face did that thing a face does when the brain refuses to process what the eyes are sending. Then the color drained out of her, not slow, all at once, like someone had pulled a plug somewhere behind her eyes. She lifted the top document out with 2 fingers, like it might burn her. The divorce petition. Beneath it, the court filing for the emergency sale authorization on the house, the signed agreement from the cash buyer, and on top of the last section, circled in blue ink by Linda Marsh herself, the monthly spousal support figure the state had calculated based on the income and asset picture between us, $2,200 a month, starting the first of the following month. The yard went dead silent. Then Carol leaned over her sister's shoulder, read enough to understand, and the silence broke apart into noise. Are you serious right now? On her birthday? What is wrong with you, Walter? Her voice climbed sharp and rehearsed. The voice of a woman who'd apparently been sharpening it for men like me her whole adult life. You spiteful old man. In front of her whole family. This is disgusting. I turned and looked at Carol directly. My voice came out steady, cutting clean through her noise. Carol, you've spent 15 years telling everyone at this club how independent your sister is. Well, she's about to get the chance to prove it. Her first payment's due the 1st of next month. The color left Carol's face fast enough that she had to grab the back of a folding chair to steady herself. I turned away from her. She had nothing left to say. I looked instead at my children and my grandchildren, all of them standing in a loose half-circle now, watching. Gary had gone still, phone forgotten in his hand. Patricia had one arm around Emma, without seeming to realize she'd done it. Tyler stood frozen near the drink table, looking between his grandmother and me like he was trying to read a scoreboard that had suddenly changed. I spoke, not loud. I didn't need to be loud. The yard had gone quiet enough that every word landed exactly where I set it down. For a long time now, you two grandkids have looked at me like I'm just the old man who's around. What nobody ever told you is that before either of your parents were even born, I paid off $11,000 of your grandmother's debt so she could even have the fresh start she built her whole life on top of. I ran a business 6 days a week for almost 40 years, so this family never missed a meal, and I drove you to 6 a.m. practices and sat in freezing rinks and folding chairs at every recital, because that's what showing up actually looks like. My retirement check paid this mortgage every single month for 15 years, while your grandmother's money went to golf trips and cruises and a cake with her own face iced onto it. Emma made a small sound. Quiet. Involuntary. Tyler's jaw tightened in a way that told me the words were landing somewhere real, somewhere past the surface. I let it sit a moment. Then I turned to Denise. She was gripping the edge of the gift table, the legal folder open in front of her, and she wasn't crying. She was past crying. She'd landed somewhere beyond it, that hollow place where there's nothing left to perform for anyone watching. A few weeks ago, right here in this house, you told me I couldn't even manage to keep a bag of ice in the freezer for a man who doesn't do anything all day. So I decided you were right. I stopped managing things. I sold the house, Denise, because it was always my house, and the money's locked in escrow to cover the debt I cleared for you before we were even married. The state ran the numbers on what you make against what I've got left, and starting next month, you'll be sending me $2,200. Same as I've been sending this family my whole working life without anybody sending me a thing back. You've got until the end of the month to figure out where you're staying, because the locks are changing the day the sale closes. I looked at her one last time. Happy birthday, Denise. I walked back into the house, down the hall, to the closet where my bags had been sitting packed for weeks. I pulled them out, carried them to the front door, and put my jacket on. Behind me, the backyard had turned into its own kind of quiet chaos. Carol's voice rising and falling, somebody crying, urgent little conversations breaking out in clusters across the lawn, like small fires, catching one after another. The caterers had gone still near the chafing dishes, professional enough not to move, human enough to stare. I stood by the front door and waited. 15 seconds. 30. Then I heard footsteps coming through the house. Gary came around the corner first, car keys already in his hand, and he didn't say a word. He just looked at me, then at the door, then back at me, and stood at my side. Patricia came a few seconds after, Emma's hand in hers, Tyler trailing just behind. Patricia stopped in front of me. "Dad," she said, and didn't finish the sentence, because she didn't need to. "I know," I told her. "Come on." We walked out into the warm evening air, the smell of cut grass and citronella still hanging over the driveway, the street I'd lived on for 40 years watching us go. Gary helped me load the bags into the truck bed. The grandkids climbed into Patricia's car without being told twice. I stood by the truck for one long moment and looked back at the house on Birchwood Lane, lit up from inside, shapes moving past the kitchen window, the blurred aftermath of 30 guests processing something. None of them had walked into that yard expecting. And in the middle of it, still standing at the gift table, holding a legal folder in a house she'd never technically owned, Denise, alone at her own 70th birthday party. The version of her life she'd built for everyone else to watch, just having walked out the front door. I got in the truck. Gary rode with me instead of going home separately. Said he wanted to make sure I got settled in all right. Neither of us said much for the first few miles. Somewhere past the second stoplight, he finally spoke. "Dad, that tournament in Columbus. Were you really there both days? Every period?" I told him. He nodded slow, looked out the window, didn't say anything else, and that was fine by me. We had time now. I had my pension money and my retirement account, untouched and finally mine again. a clean little condo with good afternoon light, and the specific, unshakable peace of a man who'd stopped waiting for somebody to remember who he was and reminded them himself instead. We drove the rest of the way with the windows cracked, warm summer air moving through the cab, and for the first time and longer than I could easily remember, everything in that truck was exactly where it was supposed to be. If this story hit home for you, you already know somebody like me. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight. And if you want to know what happened 6 weeks later when Denise showed up at my building trying to talk her way back into the settlement, let me know down below. I'll see you in the next one.